The morning calm was ripped apart by a sharp, explosive crack that echoed like a firearm discharge, immediately chased by the harsh ripping of wood fibers and then a booming impact that rattled windows throughout the surrounding houses. I was standing in my kitchen, my mug of coffee paused midway to my mouth, when the disturbance hit. By the time I hurried to my front door and flung it open, a good portion of the neighborhood had already gathered on their lawns or sidewalks, all eyes fixed on the dramatic disaster playing out right in front of my house. My enormous old oak tree had toppled over and come to rest squarely atop a pristine white Tesla that was parked in the driveway next door. Then the yelling started. It wasn't the kind of cries you'd expect from worry or surprise, but furious, blaming upbursts that sliced through the low chatter of the growing crowd. There she came, Karen Winters, the HOA president and self-proclaimed guardian of community standards, charging across my grass in her expensive athletic wear, her features twisted in pure fury. "You did this deliberately," she bellowed, pointing a flawlessly groomed finger straight at me. "This is outright criminal negligence. You're going to cover every single penny of the damage to my vehicle." I stood frozen on my porch, struggling to comprehend the scene unfolding before me. The very tree I'd been battling to preserve had inexplicably collapsed, and now I was somehow the villain in her eyes. I had no clue at the time that this incident marked just the opening chapter in a prolonged suburban ordeal that would push my tolerance to its limits, drain my savings, and ultimately make me question everything about life in a planned community. Only 6 weeks before, I had relocated to what I sincerely believed would be my ideal residence. After enduring years of urban apartment rentals, I'd at last accumulated enough for a substantial down payment on an attractive colonial-style house, complete with a generous yard, in the Oak Ridge Estates development. The real estate agent had casually noted the presence of a homeowners association with what she described as sensible rules, but it hadn't worried me in the least. I maintained a neat property and had zero intention of installing tacky lawn ornaments or performing vehicle maintenance in plain view. On my third day as a resident, while sorting through moving boxes in my living room, the doorbell chimed. A woman was standing, wearing a forced smile and holding a clipboard, attired as though she were en route to an exclusive clubhouse gathering instead of conducting routine neighbor visits. "Welcome to Oak Ridge," she offered, with a rehearsed friendliness that stopped short of genuine warmth in her gaze. "I'm Karen Winters, president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. I've come to deliver our community standards packet and collect your initial quarterly assessment." She presented me with a thick 3-ring binder that felt unusually weighty, packed with what appeared to be around 100 pages detailing rules, restrictions, and governing documents. I expressed my thanks courteously, issued a check for the fees, and figured that would conclude our exchange. How mistaken I was. The next week brought my inaugural formal HOA violation notice slipped into my mailbox. It seemed my trash receptacle had lingered at the curb for 12 hours following pickup, breaching Section 4.3.7 of the standards. I sent a polite email apology, noting that I was still in the process of moving in. Karen's reply was brief, yet appeared accommodating. I assumed the matter was closed. 3 days afterward, Karen appeared at my door once more. This visit lacked even the pretense of a smile. "We must address your tree," she declared, gesturing toward the impressive oak dominating my front yard, its limbs extending broadly like sheltering guardians over the lot. "What's the issue with it?" I inquired, truly puzzled. Karen exhaled dramatically, as if simplifying a concept for someone slow to grasp. "That oak is obstructing the mountain vista from multiple residences along the street, including my own. Our aesthetic standards explicitly require that sightline impediments be reduced. You'll need to have it taken out." I stared at her in astonishment. The oak was clearly at least 60 years old, vibrant and imposing. It offered cooling shade to my house and nesting spots for numerous birds. There was simply no chance. "I won't feel it merely to enhance a few neighbors' scenery." "I'm sorry, but I can't agree to removing a perfectly healthy tree," I responded, as civilly as possible. It was standing when I purchased the home, and it's actually one of the features that drew me to the property. Karen's face tightened. "I believe you're misunderstanding the situation. This isn't optional. The association possesses the power to mandate landscaping changes that serve the broader community interest. I held firm. With respect, I've reviewed the documents, and they specify that established mature trees are safeguarded unless they're diseased or pose a safety risk. My certified arborist confirmed its sound condition during the inspection process. It was accurate. I had deliberately inquired about the tree while finalizing the buy. Karen's gaze sharpened, and I could practically sense her mind calculating next steps. She departed abruptly without further comment, her back straight with obvious resentment. Unbeknownst to me, I had essentially initiated hostilities. In the following fortnight, the subtle retaliation commenced. It started with reports of excessive noise from my air conditioning system during nighttime operation. Next arrived a citation claiming my mailbox post measured half an inch below the mandated height. My trash bins drew another complaint, now for being partially visible from the road via a small opening in my fencing. Every infraction demanded a formal written reply, and carried warnings of monetary penalties if ignored. Fellow residents would offer awkward smiles upon spotting me, but then hasten away. I eventually discovered that opposing Karen was widely considered a local forbidden act. Her spouse held a seat on the municipal council, and she maintained ties with area vendors and contractors. Those who defied her frequently ended up socially shunned or facing unexplained holdups in services. One day, I observed a landscaping team operating in the shared space adjacent to my boundary. From my home office window, I saw Karen directing them while repeatedly motioning toward my oak. That same afternoon, upon returning from errands, I discovered the east-facing portion of my tree had been severely pruned. Mutilated better describes it, with multiple major limbs hacked off. The incisions were rough and amateurish, rendering the tree asymmetrical and at risk. I was furious. I promptly contacted a licensed arborist who verified the improper pruning had likely compromised the tree's stability. I documented everything with photos, submitted a police report for unauthorized entry and vandalism, and forwarded a firmly phrased message to the full HOA board, including the proof. Karen replied with complete disavowal of responsibility, asserting that routine upkeep had targeted only limbs extending into communal areas. 2 days on, I arrived home from my job to discover my oak entirely eradicated. No mere trimming this time, fully uprooted and gone. Just a raw stump marked the spot where the grand tree had towered hours earlier. Wood debris littered my yard, and skid trails showed where the segmented trunk had been dragged off. A resident opposite mentioned witnessing a removal crew, but presuming I had hired them. I was stunned. Who could possess the boldness to eliminate a tree from private land without consent? The answer arrived soon enough. That night, an unmarked envelope Matarami mailboxy, Ox holding an invoice from Quick Cut Tree Service for eliminating a dangerous oak at my residence. The approving signature was clearly Karen's, executed in her capacity as an HOA official. That evening was devoted to diving deep into the intricacies of tree law. Yes, it genuinely exists as a specialized field. I learned that the unauthorized felling of a mature tree can trigger liability for damages ranging from 3 to 5 times its appraised value. A 60-year-old oak of the caliber that had graced my yard could easily be valued at over $50,000. I promptly arranged meetings with 3 separate lawyers for the very next day, fully resolved to push back against this flagrant infringement on my property rights. Yet fate, or perhaps poetic justice, operates on a swifter timeline than the courts. At exactly 7:32 the following morning, while I was preparing my coffee and weighing my upcoming legal strategies, that fateful sharp snap and resounding thud echoed through the air. The poorly severed stump, with its severely damaged root structure, had destabilized further during the night. The leftover trunk section, which had been carelessly positioned at a precarious angle pointing toward Karen's driveway, had at last succumbed and collapsed squarely onto her immaculate white Tesla Model X. This loops us right back to the chaotic opening scene of our tale, with Karen unleashing furious allegations across my lawn as her $60,000 luxury electric SUV bore the weight of my fallen oak like an ill-fitting crown. The assembled onlookers from the neighborhood stood in hushed amazement while she dramatically dialed emergency services, insisting that I had intentionally engineered the destruction of her vehicle. When officers responded to the call, they displayed little enthusiasm for her conspiracy claims, particularly once I presented them with the anonymous receipt and my prior police report detailing the vandalism. Karen remained relentless, however. In less than 48 hours, I was served with official papers notifying me that she was pursuing litigation against me for negligence, destruction of property, infliction of emotional distress, and deprivation of her car's usability. Her complaint alleged that I had willfully allowed a dangerous tree to remain in place despite repeated HOA directives to mitigate the risk. The compensation she demanded approached $200,000, a figure that vastly exceeded the coverage provided by my homeowner's insurance policy. At the same time, the HOA board, evidently swayed by Karen's dominance, passed a resolution imposing fines on me for permitting a dangerous situation and requiring me to fund the remediation of the landscaping in the area affected by the tree's fall. Several residents who had observed Karen's intensifying vendetta against me, yet chosen to stay quiet, now deliberately averted their gazes whenever our paths crossed on the sidewalks. It felt as though an entire subdivision was collectively trying to rewrite reality in my presence. The stress was building intensely, and briefly, I entertained the notion of listing my house for sale and walking away to minimize further losses. But Karen's arrogant assurance of victory sparked a resolve within me that I hadn't realized I harbored. The conflict had evolved beyond a single tree. It had become a stand against a domineering figure who had operated without restraint for far too long. I retained Raymond Chen, a lawyer with expertise in real estate conflicts and a notable aversion to authoritarian homeowner associations. Upon hearing the full account and examining my compiled documentation, he broke into a genuine grin. "You've handled this impeccably up to now," he assured me. "The police filing, the certified arborist's evaluation, the detailed photographs, however, will require concrete proof linking her directly to the unauthorized cutting." That's precisely when fortune smiled upon us. Martin, the resident living 2 houses away, quietly approached me one afternoon while I was retrieving my mail. "I've been keeping an eye on the situation," he confided in a low voice. "Karen has crossed a serious line here. My home security system captures a portion off me front yard. I reviewed the recordings from the date your tree was removed. Martin's video evidence was impeccably sharp. It captured Karen actively supervising the crew from the tree service, gesturing emphatically at my oak, and even stepping onto my land to oversee their progress. The time codes aligned flawlessly with the invoice that had mysteriously appeared in my mailbox. Even more incriminating, the audio clearly recorded Karen directing the workers to disguise the cuts to appear accidental, and to position the remaining stump in a way that would direct any eventual fall toward my residence. Armed with this irrefutable proof, Raymond wasted no time in lodging a countersuit against Karen individually and the HOA board collectively for sanctioning the unlawful tree removal, trespassing, vandalism, and deliberate malice aimed at causing injury. We further submitted the details to the district attorney's office, recommending prosecution for vandalism and initiating a baseless civil action. The proceedings advanced through the courts with unexpected speed. Karen had accumulated adversaries outside our subdivision. Among them, a judge whose application for a zoning exception to install an accessibility ramp at his mother's home had been aggressively blocked by her during a public council session. Although he stepped aside from presiding over our matter, he saw to it that the case landed with a fellow jurist renowned for her rigorous adherence to property rights statutes. The date of the hearing finally came, and Karen arrived, flanked by her counsel, a polished attorney known for representing large insurers in denial claims. She positioned herself opposite me in the courtroom, periodically casting hostile looks my way while projecting an air of wrong virtue toward the bench. Her arguments unraveled almost from the outset once the security video was screened, vividly depicting her orchestrating the tree's destruction and explicitly ordering the creation of a perilous setup. The judge's demeanor shifted from impartial to visibly appalled. Karen's lawyer tried to contend that she had operated within her legitimate powers as association president, only to be swiftly interrupted. No provision in any homeowners association covenant within this jurisdiction empowers an officer to invade private land and eliminate a sound tree absent the owner's approval, the judge declared emphatically. Moreover, the demonstrated purpose of engineering harm to adjacent property through intentional instability veers into criminal territory. Karen's composure faltered visibly, as the judge proceeded not only to throw out her original suit, but to rule entirely in favor of my counterclaims. The verdict proved ruinous for her: $75,000, compensating the appraised worth of the mature oak, $20,000 in exemplary damages, and full reimbursement of my attorney costs, which had accumulated to almost $30,000. The judge additionally forwarded the file to prosecutors for potential charges related to criminal mischief and abusive litigation, though the repercussions reached far beyond monetary penalties. By the time proceedings concluded and we exited the building, Karen's husband had already fielded inquiries from multiple council members voicing alarm over the outcome. The HOA directors, detecting the changing tides in local influence, convened an urgent session that same night and voted without dissent to oust Karen from her presidential role, on grounds of conduct harmful to the community's welfare. Standing on the courthouse steps, Karen's meticulously maintained veneer shattered at last. Her features twisted in fury as she thrust an accusing finger toward me. "You've destroyed it all," she cried out, her voice cracking with emotion. "Do you even comprehend my standing in this neighborhood? 20 years I've invested in protecting our home values." "Perhaps in the future," I answered steadily, "you'll hesitate before removing someone else's tree." As Karen hurried away toward her temporary rental vehicle, her Tesla still undergoing extensive repairs, I noticed several residents who had assembled nearby to observe the resolution, trading subtle nods and barely concealed grins. The local despot had at long last encountered accountability, and I suspected Oak Ridge Estates was on the verge of transforming into a considerably more agreeable community.